sentence so substantially harsher than anybody ever in this category.
Ridiculous. This was an anti-Semitic judge.
That's what they said. They said it's just never been clearer that the guy was just really.
It's also not the.
Yeah, Pollard was also anti-Semitic. That was really.
They
let out murderers into the cemetery.
Yeah, murderers and just all these horrible people.
Crazy. But what was interesting over here was where is that? They explained this thing over here. So here's what they said. This action is not a presidential pardon. It does not vacate Mr. Rubashkin's conviction, and it leaves in place a term of supervised release and a substantial restitution obligation. So it's just they let him out of jail. He's not in jail anymore, but he's still got. Apparently, it's like a. I don't know if it's a
house arrest.
In other words, they didn't commute the sentence.
They did. They commuted the sentence.
So he's not guilty, but why would he pay us either?
I don't know.
He said, "Good, oh, he'd be strong."
It appears like it. One other thing noteworthy is that the UN, of course, he's declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel, a week and a half ago. And so they immediately ran to the UN Security Council to try and overturn it, so the US vetoed it. So now they're going to try and get it, the General Assembly to vote against it. So basically, this ambassador of the US got up and in his words said,
She's
we give Nikki Haley.
She's a woman.
Yeah. She says, we're going to just want everybody to know that we're taking names. We're watching everybody that votes against the United States, and why should the United States give money to people that vote against us? So if you vote against us, this the quote Trump is saying, it's good for us because we're going to save a lot of money in the future. But who says that? I mean, you never hear a president take such a stance, pro-Israel stance, almost true. He's got Jewish background, but nevertheless, it's still disturbing.
It's the end of days, Bezrat Hashem.
Yeah.
What is this? It's got to be a good sign. At least it appears that way.
This Trump is a Habla Meshuggah. I mean, he's really
exactly. So you just never know. Listen, didn't they say that who was it? Daryabashi. The Gemara specifically say he started out different opinions. He started out good and then he got bad, or he started out bad and he got good. It's like there's nobody that's always but I guess you have to appreciate the moments that at least appear to be good.
Okay. We don't have a prepared question. Maybe I could.
We do not have a prepared question.
If you come early enough, you can jump in.
This forum depends on unprepared questions.
I didn't prepare.
We're unprepared listeners.
Huh?
We're unprepared listeners.
So.
David, why don't you bring your kids with you again? Right?
We try to go to school sometimes.
Waste the time.
That's right. Destructive time.
You know, I want to tell you something. Where most college programs are a waste of time. You know, you want to train a doctor, so you put them through 4 years of undergraduate school with a bunch of subjects that have nothing at all to do with his medicine. I mean, the doctors, as a rule, are pretty ignorant in anything but medicine. So this is an attempt, to broaden it, but it's just waste their time. I was in school for years in order to become a psychologist. They could have taught me everything that was worthwhile in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not good for business.
It's not good, exactly.
Is it?
No, it just
In England now they're talking about making 3-year degrees into 2-year degrees.
the what?
They're saying to cram a 3-year degree into a 2-year learning because
Look, the online courses have not taken off despite technology. I mean, they're there, but the discipline, the human discipline is not there for people to just sit and learn on their own. People don't have any. So frontal learning continues. I mean, unless you're Chinese or whatever, but I'm not the typical student housing, so the typical student still wants.
The Orientals do have
They're coming as foreign students. It's also
they're
here, by the way.
excelling in America.
My wife, when she was at university, yeah, she lived.
I don't know if you can adjust it.
What happened?
If it is there, you don't want to be sitting in that odd position to be in that way.
My wife used to tell me that the Japanese and Chinese students that used to come to Hebrew University were the best students in Hebrew. You couldn't understand a word they said, but they were by far the best.
I think you can say the thing about a lot of disciplines. You can say about Torah also. I think that as far as practically speaking, like if you look at Maseches Eruvin, how much do you need that's for constructing an Eruv? Most of the Eruvin is exception cases, I think. Not what one needs to know to actually make a kosher Eruv.
Okay,
I
but
think you say
but Torah is different.
no, of course, Torah is different. I'm saying, of course, we need to learn all of it. I'm saying, if one needs to know on a practical level what one needs to do, I think in many disciplines they teach the many exception cases. But what you need to know as far as what will come up.
No, but this is not even. It's just boilerplate. It's just like it's useless. It's useless. I'm going to tell us about somebody who wanted to build a home according to the Gemara. So he went to the Rav, and the Rav looked into the Gemara, he looked in Eruvin, he looked at all the things, and he told him exactly how, he gave him blueprints how to build a home. So he built his house, and then it's finally built. He comes into his house, and he opens up one kitchen cabinet, the whole house collapses. So he runs to the Rav and he says to what's going on. The Rav says, really? So he opens up the door. He says, oh yeah, Taisus has. Gosh. Okay, go ahead. What's your...
I guess you'll tell me if it's taking us too far out of the field. I didn't know how to respond to a guest that we had, Shabbos. I said over this Torah from the Nesiva Shalom on the Medrash says that the love of a Kodesh Baruch Hu Kol Yisrael is 3 lashons of Chiba, and we learned it from Shem Udina.
I thought there was more. I thought there was more.
I think the Medrash
like
says
5,
3
isn't it?
lashonos of Chiba, Dava, whatever.
Yes.
So the Tzibah Shalom and others talk about Shechem coming from a very high place in Gilgulim. So I said over the store, and this woman was there. I said, that's all garbage. Rav Sadia Gaon says that it's all Darishkai. I didn't know how to respond.
Taiva, what? What's the name?
What? No, Gilgulim.
Oh,
Gilgulim. Like, what do you mean? It's Shechem, Rishon, and there was again, Hanania ben Teradion is from Shechem.
Right.
I mean, all this one. Zohar Kadosh talks about all these Gilgulim, what we're doing. So, what Sadigon says, it's not like I didn't know how to. Is that an issue that we could address? Does it take us too far out of this world?
The Rambam in the Meir Revoichim also dismisses things like Shadim. And the Vilna Gaon writes about the Rambam a lashon about how philosophia ha'arura, because the Rambam was very invested in Aristotle, and he writes about Aristotle that he was korev l'nevuah, So the Vilna Gaon writes on the Rambam, he says, "Ha-philosophia ha'arura hiti es daitoi." It's a pretty sharp expression. The cursed philosophy, kind of like twisted his mind. So there's this, in general, there are those. Got it. Hollywood.
Don't want to ruin
A little makeup.
Don't want to ruin a good reputation, is it?
So there were those people who were not part of the Kabbalistic Messiah, and because they were not part of it, had no way of really, they couldn't frame it. They didn't have any place for it. There's a sefer written by Rabbi ben Gabbai, who was either a contemporary of or earlier than the Ariya Kodesh. He was an author of several Sifrei Kabbalah, but he writes there that he saw a letter from the Rambam saying that someone came to him when he was elderly, and taught him Chachmas HaKabbalah, and if he had not already, if his writings were had not yet been disseminated in the world, he would have recanted some of the things that he said. So I think that if, and I don't know that Rabbi Sadia Goin said it, I would have to see what Rabbi Sadia Goin said, but if he did, so he was not privy to that tradition. And
That's a growl.
what?
So how are we supposed to reconcile these two tracks? The rationalist, if we call it that, and the, I don't know what we call the other track.
The Gra was a big mikuba.
The Gra was a huge mikuba.
I understand that. I'm saying, so how are we supposed to reconcile these two tracks? I mean, do these twains not meet, or?
So if it was something we believe in, it should be also in the Yud Gimel, all the different principles that we hold by, right? It's
I mean, there's
amazing.
nothing.
It doesn't- What?
The Rambam proposed the building.
Right, I'm saying, so that's where.
Rabbi, you previously answered this question just in the gang of the psak. There's never a change. The Rambam is not.
And what?
When it comes to psak, the Rambam has never erred. And there may be certain understandings of how we understand what's happening in the Chumash or that type of thing. So that there really isn't. That's what you said in the past. See what happens today.
I would suggest that there's an expression in Chazal, im loy neviim heim, b'nei leviim heim. Which sets forth the idea that there are things that Klal Yisrael comes to practice, comes to believe, comes to accept as part of what's authentic for Jews, where philosophic discussion or logical arguments are not the determining factor, but there's something about the wisdom, the intuitive wisdom of Klal Yisrael, which is inspired. And when Klal Yisrael, as a whole, embraces certain concepts that even though you can't say that they do so prophetically, but there's something about the innate wisdom of Klal Yisrael which is inspired, which is, in a certain sense, which is prophetic. Klal Yisrael over the ages, its greatest sages, the greatest majority of which, not 100%, but certainly Klal Yisrael over time has come to recognize the power of the Zeir HaKodesh, the power of Kabbalah, the legitimacy of the Kabbalah. So there are, I don't know about this particular Sadia Goyen statement, but regardless of what some of our great luminaries may have said as Yechidim, Klal Yisrael has made a commitment, Klal Yisrael has made a statement. And that statement is one that recognizes the Chachmas HaKabbalah, it recognizes the place that Gilgulim have in shaping the events of Klal Yisrael, the personages of Klal Yisrael. So I would tell you this, I would be very, very suspicious, very hesitant today to trust someone who has rejected those premises. If there's somebody today who takes the position that the Chachmas HaKabbalah, or that the Zohar, or that these ideas of Gilgulim or Shadim or we have the thing with I get worried about my memory these days. Possession, where a soul takes possession of it. Huh? Dibukim are not legitimate. I would not allow that person to espouse any kind of teaching in Klal Yisrael. I feel that occupying that position today discredits that person. Klal Yisrael has come to accept these things. Klal Yisrael is not. This is Klal Yisrael in Ashkenaz, Klal Yisrael in all the lands of the Sephardic lands. This is a national, historic kind of a statement. Klal Yisrael has come to embrace these things, and some of its greatest geniuses in every which way have demonstrated that these things. I'm going to tell you guys a spooky story. A really spooky story.
To turn on the lights?
Huh? My mother told me, by the way, this is not the spooky story, but I'll tell you this. My mother, Alea Shalom, told me that when she was a young girl, that she once stepped into the waiting room where the Chassidim would wait to go in to her father. Her father was the Rebbe of Babov. This was the Kedushas Tzion, and she was a young girl, I think maybe somewhere around 9 years old or so. And she stepped into the room, and the door to her father's room opened up, and her father stepped into the doorway to greet the next person who was going to come in. And a woman in the room stood up. And she opened her mouth and did not move her mouth. And a voice came out. It was a man's voice saying, Rebbe, I was a butcher. And we're doing a butcher, and I gave treif meat to Jews to eat, and I need a tikkun. And so this was clearly, this was a woman with a man's voice coming out making this statement. My mother said she passed out, and she said she was sick for months afterwards from fright with this dibuk. But I want to tell you a story.
That's not the same.
My father, Zechariah L'Bracha, told me, I heard this from him directly, that when he heard that there was, when he was a young man, he heard that there was a sheikhet in some town who had a story about his grandfather. This is the Motel of Hannes Steipel. The Motel was a world-renowned Goyen and a Rebbe of many thousands of Chassidim. Anyway, so he said he heard that there was somebody who had a story, a sheikhet who had a story that involved the Motel.
This is in America.
Huh?
This happened in America, yes?
No,
It's on Europe.
this was in Europe. My father came to America in 1927, so this was probably in like.
Where is
Hannes
Hannes
Steipel is about 3 hours out of Kiev. It's not far from Chernobyl, Cherkass, all of those cities. I visited Hannes Steipel about.
If not now, but maybe another, if you can give us like a history, like a comprehensive history of Hannes Steipel, where you come from. Maybe not now, it's out of context, but like.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. We can do that. The Steipler was from Hannes Steipel. So, in fact, he and my father were both named for the same person. My father was named Yaakov Yisrael. The Steipler was named Yaakov Yisrael. They're both named after my father's grandfather's grandfather. Anyway, so he heard there was somebody, so he wanted to hear the story. So he went to this town. And he came in to the sheikhet, and he introduced himself as Remotel's grandson. And he told him, he said, I heard that you have an interesting story about my grandfather. So he said, yes. And he said, and I'll share it with you. But first, he said, I want you to see something. So he called his granddaughter. And he said to bring me a cup of water filled to the top. So she brought him in a cup of water filled to the top, and he put it on his hand, and he stretched out his hand like this. And he said to my father, you see, my hand does not shake. I could still be a sheikhet today. My hand doesn't tremble, I could be a sheikhet. He says, but I stopped shechting a long time ago. And that's what this story is about. So he was an elderly man, this sheikhet. So he said, I was a sheikhet in some city, where I had a shutif. There were the two of us were the sheikhtim for this particular town, and we would alternate. 1 week I would shecht, and 1 week he would shecht. And we would always shecht the day after a yerid. A yerid was a market day. He said, we always shecht the day after a market day because that's when the farmers would bring in, everybody would come into yerid, they would bring their crafts, they would bring the farmers would bring eggs and milk and whatever. He said, and farmers would bring their cows. And, we would shecht because the butchers would try to pick what they thought was a healthy animal, and then we would come and we would shecht, and hopefully if they're right, then then they get to make a right. And if they're wrong, if the animal is straight, they lose a lot of money. That was a little bit of a gamble. So he said, one night, he said, I had a dream. Here's where the spooky starts. He said, I had a dream, and there was this voice who said to me in the dream, you need to help me. I was a katzav, I was a butcher, and I was Michael Trefus. He said, and my neshama has not had any rest. They won't let me into Gan Eden, and they won't let me into Gehenna. So he said, so my neshama has been in a state of torment, he says, and finally he said, I got a certain reprieve where they were megalgal me in an animal, and a cow. He said, and here's what the cow looks like. He says, and in my dream, I saw this cow. He said, he said tomorrow, he said, you're going to be asked to shecht this cow. He said, if the shechita is kosher, and frum Jews will make a bracha over this meat, he said, I will have a tikkun, and I think I'll be allowed into Gehenna, and I'll be able to finally get into Gan Eden. So he said, Siman l'davar, he said, not only this is what I look like, but Siman l'davar, I will not allow anybody to shecht me other than you. So he said, I woke up, he said, it was the strangest dream I had ever had. He said, but I dismissed it. Next morning, I went to the Beis Medrash. I was davening. He says, "A midrash menasrei." I heard the door to the Beis Medrash open, and he said, and immediately I began to sweat. He said, everybody usually comes on time. In the middle, he says, I heard steps coming, and they stopped behind me. He said, and I began to worry. He said, I ended Shemoneh Esrei, and I turned around, and there was a butcher. So he said to me, I have a cow for you to shecht. I said to him, yesterday was not a yerid. Where did you get a cow? He said, a person came in, it wasn't a yerid, but he brought this cow, it looks like a good cow, so I bought it. So I said to him, it's not my week to shecht, it's my partner's week to shecht. He said, I went to your partner, and he told me that he can't come because he has fever, and he's lying in bed, can't do it. So he said at this point, he said this dream was too vivid, and he said, I was trembling. He said, come with me. I said to this, come with me. He said, we went to my partner, and he was lying in bed, and I said to him, get up and come with me. He said, I am sick, I can't come. I said to him, get out of bed and come with me. You must come with me. He didn't have no idea what this was all about. He said, he went with me, and we came, and he said, and I saw the cow, and this was the cow. So I said to my partner, go shech the cow. He said there were like 4 gesunte goyim who held the cow down. And my partner went over, and as soon as he approached, this cow began to, he began to throw himself around. My partner said, you can't shech that cow. There's no way that you can shech the cow. So he came back to me. I said, well, go back and try again. He tried a second time, same thing. So I said, okay, give me the chalav. He said, I took the chalav and I walked over to the cow. The cow was perfectly still. So he said, so I shechted the cow. He says, and my partner went over. What they usually do when they shecht is that they cut the chest, and before they take out the lung, someone feels around inside to see if there's any sirchas, if there's any adhesions. Because once you take it out, then you don't feel the insert, and then you can only see that. But if you feel around, then immediately you can tell. So he says, so my partner felt around and he pulled his hand out and he said, this is not good. He said, by this time I was so distraught that when he told me it's not good, I slapped him. He said to me, what is with you? You pull me out of bed, I'm sick with fever, and now you slap. What's going on? So he says, I told him the story. He said, so he had some sense of what was going on. He said, we took the lung out and we took it to the Rav in our community. And I told him the story, and the Rav said, if you hadn't told me the story, I would have said this is not good. He said, but I'm not doing that. He says, you need to talk to somebody much, much bigger than I am. I would suggest that you go to the Matal of Hana Steipel. He said, it's just a couple hours away. Take the lung with you and tell him the story. So he said to my father, he said, I took the lung and I went to your grandfather and I told him the story. And your grandfather said to me, go outside and wait. And he locked the door. He spent hours alone, and he came out and he said, this is kosher, and I want you to call. And he named several Hasidim. He said, I want them to be the ones, and they were apparently particularly inspired young people. He said, I want them to be the ones to eat of this meat. Anyway, so he said, he said, your grandfather saved me. He said, I had a friend who was a sheikhet in a different community, and he had somewhat of a similar story, and they weren't machshir, the cow. And he said, and my friend walked out of the Beis HaShchita, and something happened, and he became blind. So he said, your grandfather saved my life, he said, but from that point forward, I stopped shechting. That was it. That was the end of my career as a sheikh. So I'm just telling you the story. My father told me that he went to the sheikh. This is what the sheikh told him. This was his story. So.
What was the last part? Did he say about himself? That this same shochet said that he had a friend who became blind after a shechita,
Yeah.
so that scared him to.
Yeah, because
Because they puzzled up the
anyway, so, that I confess to you that I do come from a different tradition where, I've heard these there's the Rabbi Chanan Wasserman tells, has, I don't know if it's where it's recorded, but it's a very, very famous thing about where the Chavetz Chaim,
Brought down the Lev
Lev brings it?
The Dibuk.
Huh?
Story with the Dibuk?
And starting with the Dibuk, where he exercised the Dibuk, and he was there. He was present at the exorcism. He was present there, and it's a fascinating account.
Love that.
But was not even just going outside in terms of Torah. Like you see the 10 brothers, and they say Gilgulim for the Asura. So that's, or the Gemara says about the din that didn't happen. So in the next Gilgul, right, Elokim ina liyadoy, the ladder and Kunda. You see even in the Gemara, you don't have to go outside of.
Right,
Torah,
but
you
anyway,
go
just
out.
in general,
They say Krishma Laramita. That's it's there in the introduction to it.
again, I think, I mean, just to go back to a general perspective. My general perspective is I trust the intuitive wisdom of Christ. B'nei Nevi'im. And Klal Yisrael as a whole has embraced this tradition. So again, I would, and I don't know that we would that we would condemn someone, but I would not trust someone who has rejected this now, what has become a time-honored understanding. I would be very suspect about their credentials to teach.
Larry, how are we supposed to relate to Iron Har has become like such a big thing today in the film community? Like, how are we supposed to relate to it? I mean, people do all kinds of things to like worry about Iron Har, and they go to these healers and.
You got to take everything with I forget who it was. It was a renowned atheist who was being interviewed by a reporter. He came into his house to interview him, and there was a horseshoe.
Niels Bohr,
That
physicist. Yeah, I just read this.
Anyway, so he said to him, a horseshoe. He said, "Why do you have it?" He said, "Well, it's a good luck." He said, "Well, you don't believe in that." He said, "It doesn't make any difference if I believe in it or not. It's good luck whether I believe in it or not."
Jewish Niels Bohr.
But how can we understand that a lot of these incidents that happened, let's say, before the Shoah, is there something that happened since then that it doesn't seem that there's this kind of a level?
There's definitely been something has changed.
Because there's so many stories that we don't hear.
It's high about that Maisa with the Dybbuk. I heard that in the whole time that he declared that that was the last Dybbuk.
Yeah, I said.
There's something about the klipa becoming bottle and Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, I know. Where did they come from?
I heard it from an Adam Gadol 40 years ago.
It seems to me that the klipa is alive and well.
I don't know what it means.
I was in Tel Aviv the other day, I think.
It's klipa.
It was somebody special.
Is there really saying using Klal Yisrael as a hechzer kashrus here, that the fact that Klal Yisrael has been makabel something, we trust the wisdom of Klal Yisrael, and therefore that's a
Right. I think that's the basic principle.
It's very different from halacha. We have a das yochid and we have haskama of ruba the ruba of Rishonim Achronim. So the das yochid is not doesn't carry much weight, if any. That should be different in like that.
So there's a problematic flip side of that. Bisman zeh, I'm saying that we often say it's a minhag shtus, or where did he get that from, or who does he think he is, or like there's no one to tell anyone to stop doing anything anymore. If we just take, huh?
What are the Gedarim?
What?
What are the Gedarim?
Ask your local rabbi.
No, but we have to, if it's a minhag that has been, let's say, in a family for generation after generation, then we'll assume that that's.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, those things,
But something new that came out. It's like,
Things in the morning that I can see it says Rav in the cemetery. He looked at the tables. He said that 90% of the people here died because of Ein Hara.
Because of Ein Hara.
I know, yeah.
Tesla has a mikdav.
Yeah, what?
Tesla has a mikdav. Speaks, he addresses the Ein Hara.
Yeah.
I think it's in Chelik Dalet.
Do you remember what he says?
Huh?
Do you remember what he said?
He says it's a getter of a tefillah. The person has tsar from somebody else who is, let's say, showing off. So it blabs like a tefillah that this person shouldn't have this tzlach or whatever.
The Metzora Stavik explains it by Pashas Lech Lecha, Gabe Sarah and Hagar. It says, I don't know if it's so much a tefillah, but it says that basically it elicits a base din shamala regarding what this person's lot is, if there's a tsar that's being caused to another human being by that lot. So be'etzem you can escape the base din shamala, or if you come before it and they judge you and they deem you not to be worthy of it, so then it acts out. So the Ein Hara is really it's an illicit.
Actually, I mean, in Africa we have a thing with the pieces of red.
That what?
We would like to have something red on the clothing when they use it. So how, let's see what Ryan's saying, like how does just having a piece of red, how does that take away the Ein Hara or protect? You know?
School, I don't know.
But can I just, I'm finally figuring out what I really want to ask you for. There's the Sefer Chaim from the Maharal's brother tells a story of they got to Parshas, one of the Tochos, I don't remember which one it was, and no one in the shul wanted to go up and take the Aliyah. And he said, in the book, he heard the story, it happened in another town, and the Sefer Torah stood there for several hours, open, and so he said about the story that I can't believe nothing happened to the Zakanim of that town. And I think he says over there, before us, that those people are more afraid of the Klalos than they are afraid of the source of all the Klalos. And I think that's like this obsession with Ein Hara. I think we're forgetting the Iker, and we talk this a Tafel. It's supposed to be maybe Ein Hara is a cause, but we have to remember who's behind the Ein Hara. That's really what we have to be afraid.
I spoke to Rabbi Yoshev and Rabbi Shach about it.
But Ein Hara?
About Ein Hara.
And?
Yeah.
And they said?
The story was that my wife thought that somebody put an Ein Hara on her. On me. So I said, I don't know what that is. So I asked Rabbi Yoshev. He says, Mi yasima lecha Ein Hara. In Hebrew. So she said, Yeshel Sonya. So then, first he was like, skeptical, or he was making fun of, that was the tone of it.
What he was saying, like, what?
So she said, Yeshel Sonya. So he says, go to the kotel and say, I don't remember which kapitel, for some reason it's nostalgic, men right away.
Yeah.
He said, you say this kapitel and the Ein Hara will go off. And we walked out of there cracking up, laughing, because he was mevatala. And I don't remember it so clearly how it came up with Rav Shach, but basically he was mevatala. So I think maybe later on I thought the Gemara says something to the extent that if you goris it, that I don't remember Lashon in the Gemara. If you goris it, then it's short of it, but it's not. Then, so they were both mevatala. I think that's the tzad hashavah shebenehem, and maybe that's a mahalach that we can learn from.
I mean, this is a koich of an ayin. I mean, the power of, Moshe Rabbeinu is instructed by Kodesh Baruch Hu to go up on a mountain. He's supposed to look at Eretz Yisrael And that's because the power of his eye affected Jewish history. I mean, because he was, the Ben Shalom showed him what things, and in certain sense invited him to impact on that by his sight. There are, what?
It says no mageva shesum ha'ayin.
Right.
The famous master of Zalman, an Avreich, came to him and asked him if he should buy this apartment. He said, "Where is it?" He said, "Fine." He said, "I'd like to come and see it with you." So he went the next day with the Avreich. Was shocked to see it with him. So then the Avreich asked him, "Why did you?" "I wanted to see it. I wanted to give him an idea."
You see in Pirkei Avos, by the Talmid of Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. He's a derech shidduch ba'odam, ein tova. What's the matter? Ein ra.
Yeah, in Tova was Keneged Kulam,
No, it was Lev Tov.
Oh, Lev Tov, right, that's the
Lev Tov.
So if the Chazal said that if you machshav it in its soilet, what's going on there? What's the pshat in that?
Yeah, we have Ano Mizarab the Yosef Ano. Where Yaakov gives a bracha to Yosef, Yidgul Aroi Bekerev Haaretz. So Rashi there cites a Chazal that an Ein Hor is not shelet on the fish, and that Yosef HaTzadik has a bracha that he and his progeny will be immune to Ein Hora. So they have in the Gemara something that when this thing about Ein Hora, something Ano Mizarad Yosef, so an Ein Hora doesn't have any. My point over here is really the following: that you have sometimes where the Gemara says. The things that a person is sensitive to, which is not part of his sensory experience, but because a person is more than just a life that's taking place in a physical body, but he has a neshama which connects him to the supernal spheres. So a person is aware of things in a very kind of a remote way, which some dimension of his being is introduced to someplace else. So. The Baal Shem Kodesh says that's the way when it says that every day is a baskel from House Sinai, or the Ben Shem calls out Tshuva Banim Shevavim. Banim calls out, do Tshuva. So he asked, what's the point in the baskel if nobody hears it? Ben Shem is summoning people to do Tshuva, but nobody hears it. So he says, we do hear it. Our neshama hears it at that level, and it ripples through all of the phases of creation until it reaches this person by a little tug. And in most cases, people will dismiss that tug as indigestion. But if a person were, in a certain sense, to to be sensitive to the fact that this is a tug from above, then he really could, he could get into it. So I think this thing with dismissing an Ein Hara is that there are some people, maybe whether they're Zara the Yosef or whatever, who don't take Ein Hara seriously, and that's because something about their essence is in fact immune to it. Whereas those people who feel that they're concerned about them, that's kind of an indication that their essence is in fact vulnerable to it. So I think those people need to take it seriously. Just the fact that they think that this affects them adversely is an indication that they're somebody who just totally disregards it. So it's they are in fact immune to it. But I don't think we can. There are too many Mamar Chazal that deal with the efficacy of an Ein Hara. I once went to a lady in Yerushalayim who cancels out Ein Haras. So what she did was she put a sheet over me and she boiled up lead. And then she took a thing of cold water, put it over my head, poured this hot lead into the cold water. And then when you look at it, so they did it for my Rebbitzin, and when they did it for my Rebbitzin, you could see eyes in there. The lead turned into eyes. Mine did not turn into eyes. Mine turned into jagged mountains. So she said to me, "Your problem is not Ein Hara." It says your wife's problem is Ein Hara. Your problem is stress.
This in Yerushalayim, this woman.
This woman in Yerushalayim.
Yeah, she's in Yemin Moshe.
I don't know. I don't know where she is. I don't remember where I went. I don't know.
Now she's probably in
Used to spit.
I've heard the story before. So what was the Shabbos?
No, the original question.